All right, welcome to The Explainer. Today, we are digging into a really unique document. It's called Fascism.pdf, and it's written for a younger audience, using a dragon as a narrator to get its ideas across. Now, just to be clear, our job here isn't to take a side or endorse what's in it. We're simply going to break down its main arguments and claims, sticking right to what the source itself says.
So here's our roadmap. We're going to follow the book's lead. We'll start with the narrator, this dragon named Zorin. Then we'll look at the historical playbook it lays out. After that, we'll get into the modern parallels it claims to see, its theories about threats to our institutions, and finally, we'll wrap up with the big warning it leaves us with.
Okay, first up, Zorin's mission. The whole document is really framed through the eyes of its narrator, and this character sets the entire tone for the book's message.
And that narrator is Zorin the Dragon. He's presented as this ancient, super wise creature who's seen it all, watched human history for centuries. His whole purpose, as he states it, is to walk the reader through history's patterns, arguing that these lessons are like a treasure we just can't afford to ignore.
And that brings us right to the book's core argument. Its main goal is to draw some really direct comparisons between the rise of fascism in 1930s Germany and what it sees in modern political figures. It's worth noting, the source uses the name Thrump when it talks about Donald Trump. So to stay true to the document, that's the name we'll be using.
So, to build its case, the book first lays out what it calls the fascist playbook. It uses the rise of the Nazi Party in Germany back in the 1930s as its historical case study.
The source basically paints this picture of a five-step domino effect. It argues that it all started with the economic pain of the Great Depression, which, created fertile ground for Hitler's propaganda. Then came the Reichstag fire, which it claims was exploited to grab power with something called the Enabling Act. And the final step, the Night of the Long Knives, using violence to just crush any opposition that was left.
Okay, so with that historical groundwork laid, the book then makes its most direct, and you could say its most controversial comparisons. It argues that we're seeing echoes of those exact same tactics playing out in politics today.
The first big theme the book dives into is propaganda. And on this slide, you can see exactly how the source defines it as a tool for controlling information, making enemies out of people, and making a leader look like a hero.
And here's where the book draws its first straight line to the present day. It argues that the state-run media of 1930s Germany has a modern-day counterpart. It points to things like calling major news organizations fake news and the way figures like Trump and Elon Musk use social media to completely shape the story. The next tactic the book calls out is scapegoating. It defines this as the strategy of pointing the finger at a specific minority group for all of society's problems, as a way to redirect everyone's anger. And here's exactly how the source connects that past to the present. It draws a direct line from the Nazi regime blaming Jewish and Roma people for Germany's issues to what it calls modern-day rhetoric that targets immigrants and other minority groups as the root cause of our problems today. The third historical echo the book gets into is the cult of personality. It's presented as this effort to create a larger-than-life messianic leader, someone who's painted as a savior, who can do no wrong, and who has all the simple answers to really complex problems.
So here, the book connects Hitler's carefully built image as Germany's savior to what it calls Thrump's populist strongman thing, and also to Elon Musk's very carefully crafted persona as a visionary genius. The source is basically arguing that these are just new school versions of a very old school tactic. So the book then pivots. It moves away from these big historical themes and starts making some very specific allegations about what it calls a modern-day effort to take apart our government institutions from the inside. An essential piece of evidence the book uses for this is Project 2025. It describes this as a massive, comprehensive plan from the Heritage Foundation to completely overhaul the federal government. The source claims that even though Trump has publicly denied it, his actions in office line up really closely with this plan.
Then the book lays out one of its most detailed and I'd say dramatic allegations. It's this supposed 45-day government takeover plan that it calls the Doge Initiative. According to the source, this plan involved Trump and Musk in a really fast consolidation of power that would end up in what it calls a new norm. Now, to back this up, the source provides this list of federal agencies it alleges were the main targets. According to the book, the plan was to restructure the Department of Justice, mess with the FCC to control the media, and gut EPA regulations, among a bunch of other things. The source also makes a very pointed claim about the military. It reports what it calls an unprecedented purge of the top brass. It even names names: the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, the head of the Navy, and the vice chief of the Air Force, all supposedly dismissed and replaced by a single retired general.
The book then points to this data as more evidence of this dismantling process. It claims that hundreds of new probationary employees were fired from the Federal Aviation Administration and the National Nuclear Security Administration, putting safety at risk. It does also note that most of those NNSA firings were eventually reversed.
And all of this builds to the book's final act. It pulls together all of these historical parallels and modern claims into one big final warning for its readers. The source argues that these are the key lessons we have to take away from all this. It hammers home the dangers of scapegoating and propaganda, how democratic norms can slowly be worn away, and it really stresses how crucial it is for citizens to be vigilant and to think critically.
And this is pretty much Zoran the Dragon's final word. The book wraps up by pleading with its readers to stay watchful, to question everything they're told, to hunt for the truth, and to find the courage to stand up against what they see as injustice.
And in the end, this explainer of Fascism.pdf finishes exactly where the book itself does, with a very direct and provocative question for you, the reader. By laying out its entire case, the source's final goal is to make every reader ask themselves, how can we stop history from repeating itself? And that's the thought it leaves us with. Thanks for tuning in.